Have you ever heard of a dog that was rejected at auction, deemed useless, worthless, and almost left to die just because it wouldn't do what people wanted? But then a boy came along. He didn't see a broken animal. He saw a life waiting for a second chance. He decided to take it home. But is love enough to heal a broken heart? Can a dog who has been so hurt that he no longer believes in humans stand up again? And what happens when fate forces him to face the biggest test of his life? Before we continue, leave us a comment telling us where in the world you're watching this video from. And if you believe in heartwarming stories, don't forget to subscribe now, because tomorrow there will be a special story just for you. The wind blew across the vast Nebraska plains, stirring pale yellow dust across the dry ground. Beneath the arched roof of the old auction house, the crowd's noise mingled with the auctioneer's cries. Powerful animals, war horses, hunting dogs, healthy cattle were being bought and sold for astronomical prices. But in the bustle, in a hidden corner at the back, there was a small, forgotten life. A golden retriever, gaunt and bony, cowered in a rusted iron cage. Its once golden coat was now matted in patches, its ears drooping as if it were trying to shrink away from human gaze. Its eyes, not those of a wild animal, nor those of an angry one, were those of a soul that had lost hope. The auctioneer stood before the cage, his voice dry, as if he were selling a worthless object. This one isn't worth a penny. Abandoned, too weak to hunt or work. Who wants it? No hands went up. No bids were made. No one wanted a broken dog. A man standing nearby smirked, his voice mocking. Maybe it's best to let it die. A few of the people laughed in agreement. A shrill laugh, not of joy, but of indifference, of cruel indifference. And perhaps, if no one stopped today, the dog would truly disappear, sink into oblivion like thousands of other creatures deemed worthless. But its fate had changed. From the middle of the crowd, a clear voice rang out, "I'll buy it." Everyone turned, their eyes searching for a skinny boy, about 13, with worn shoes and a worn coat. Oliver. He did not look like a potential buyer. Not a hunter, not a farmer looking for a working dog. Just a boy. The brief silence was broken by a sneer. "You're joking, kid. This dog can't even live, let alone help you." The laughter grew louder, but Oliver did not reply. He just stood there, silently looking into the iron cage. His eyes and the dog's eyes met. In that moment, two strangers' lives were connected by an invisible thread. No one noticed, but something in the dog's eyes changed. A spark, however faint, that flickered in the darkness of despair. Oliver leaned down and whispered, "I'll name you Bailey, and I promise you'll have another chance." The boy might have been a child, but there was something in his voice that the crowd didn't have. Trust. He pulled out a small bag of money. No thick wad of bills like the other bidders. No fancy leather wallet. Just the loose change he'd been saving for months. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow, looking down at the money in Oliver's hand. $5. Less than the price of a fast food meal. Less than a cheap toy. "Are you sure?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. Oliver nodded firmly. "Yes." And Bailey was no longer abandoned. When Oliver opened the door to the cage, the dog flinched, the instinct of a creature accustomed to pain. But when the boy's warm hand touched him, the first touch did not carry violence, did not carry fear, but carried hope. With gentle eyes, Oliver comforted him, as if to say, "You are safe. No one can hurt you anymore." But this story is not over. Because saving a life is not just an action of a day. It is a long journey. Can Bailey trust humans again? Can the invisible wounds in his soul be healed? And can Oliver keep his promise? Please continue to follow this story, because if you have come this far, it proves that you also have a seed of kindness in your heart. If you believe in second chances, if you believe that love can heal everything, please take a second to like this video, because it helps many more people know this story. And don't leave, because what happens next will bring tears to your eyes. Bailey had a new home, but a home didn't mean a safe place. When Oliver first held Bailey, he thought that if he just brought her home, everything would be okay. But as the car started to roll away from the auction house, he realized that some pains couldn't be taken away by a roof or a warm meal. Bailey wasn't like other dogs. She didn't lift her head, didn't eagerly watch the world pass by the window like other dogs. She just curled up in the corner of the car, her body as stiff as a cold stone. Her eyes were wide, not out of curiosity, but out of a fear that was etched into her soul. Oliver touched her back gently, feeling every muscle tense under his palm. "You're okay, Bailey. No one's going to hurt you here." But Bailey didn't react. She didn't panic. She didn't struggle. She didn't make a sound. It was silent, as if it had grown so accustomed to the human coldness that it no longer dared to believe in kindness. Grandpa Walter's farm was a few miles outside of town, a peaceful, wide-open place where any dog should have been able to run free and enjoy life. But Bailey did not run. When Oliver opened the car door, instead of rushing out like the other dogs, he just cowered, his eyes fixed on the ground, as if one wrong step would be enough to punish him. Why? Oliver slowly reached out his hand. With just a light touch, Bailey jerked back, trembling. The boy frowned. He turned to Grandpa Walter, a man with silver hair and sharp but understanding eyes. Walter had trained hundreds of dogs in his life, but when he looked at Bailey, he just shook his head slowly. "Someone has treated him badly. You have to be patient, Oliver." But what had Bailey done? Why was he so afraid? Bailey didn't bark, didn't react, didn't act aggressively, but there was an invisible fear inside him, a feeling that he could be punished at any moment, as if the whole world existed only to hurt him. Every time Oliver approached, he would shrink into a corner, trying to make himself as small as possible. When food was placed in front of him, Bailey didn't dare eat. He would just glance at the bowl of food, then back at Oliver, as if waiting for something, or a blow. At night, he didn't sleep. He just lay there, eyes wide open, glued to a dark corner of the room, as if some ghost was lurking. Oliver had seen abandoned dogs before, but Bailey wasn't just abandoned. He had lost his trust. And the question that was burning in his mind was, how do you help a creature that has lost all trust in humans? He didn't force Bailey. He didn't try to touch him. He didn't give him orders. He didn't ask for anything. Oliver was simply there. He sat next to Bailey every day, saying nothing, doing nothing, just letting him know that his presence wasn't a threat. He read aloud every night, his gentle voice echoing in the room, letting Bailey get used to human sounds in a different way, a way that wasn't scary. He placed food in front of him and stepped back, giving him time to decide that the food wasn't a trap. And then, after days of patience, something magical happened. Bailey took a small step toward Oliver, just one step, but for Bailey, it was a giant step. Oliver looked at him, his eyes shining with new faith. "Good job, Bailey. You're doing great." But the journey wasn't over. One morning, Oliver decided to take Bailey out into the pasture behind the farm, a place of sunshine and fresh air, where Bailey could feel free. But as soon as the chain touched his neck, Bailey panicked. He thrashed wildly, dragging Oliver to the ground. His eyes panicked as if he were fighting an invisible ghost. No, he didn't just hate being chained. He was terrified. Had Bailey ever been tied up, tortured, chained so tightly that it hurt? Oliver let go of the chain, but Bailey didn't run. He just stood there, panting, trembling, as if he had just escaped from a nightmare. The boy sat down beside him and whispered, "Bailey, I'm sorry. I'll never scare you again." And from that moment, Oliver understood one thing. This dog had a terrible past that he didn't know about. A few days later, while buying food for Bailey at the store in town, Oliver overheard a conversation. "That hound? Oh, it used to belong to Briggs." The name rang like an alarm bell. Who was Briggs? The boy ran home and asked his grandfather. When he heard the name, Walter was silent for a few seconds. "Briggs is a cruel man. He trains hounds his way, not with rewards, but with fear." Oliver felt his blood run cold. What if a dog doesn't hunt? Walter sighed, his eyes shining with grief. He threw it away like it was broken. Now, everything was clear. Bailey was no ordinary dog. It survived terrible things. But it's still here. There's still a little bit of hope left, a fragile glimmer of hope that Oliver needs to protect. If you're still following this story, I know you believe in love. If you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video to help spread the word. Because what happened next would change Bailey's life forever. Bailey was getting better. The shaking had lessened, and his eyes weren't as panicked as before. He was starting to trust Oliver, at least when no one else was around. But that trust was still fragile. A wound had been bandaged, but was it healed? Or was it just hiding a deeper pain that Bailey had yet to face? That day, the sky was clear, and the vast fields smelled of hay. Oliver decided to take Bailey for a walk farther than usual. He wanted to let him feel the big world outside, to let him understand that not everywhere was filled with pain. But just as he stepped onto the trail leading to the edge of town, a hoarse voice rang out from ahead. "That dog! Don't tell me you bought him!" Oliver turned around, startled. A tall, muscular man was leaning against an old wooden fence. His face was lined with small scars, his eyes as sharp as an old wolf's. Samson, a longtime hunter in the area, one who had never seen animals as friends, only as tools. Bailey stiffened instantly. He didn't bark, he didn't growl. He just trembled, his eyes shining with old fear. Oliver tightened his grip on the leash, blocking Bailey like a protective wall. "You know him?" Samson's lips curled slightly, giving Bailey a contemptuous look. "Of course. He used to be a hunting dog, but he was too weak, too stupid to do what a hunting dog should do." Oliver felt a chill run down his spine. "He doesn't hunt?" Samson laughed, a sarcastic laugh, without any sympathy. "That's right. His previous owner, a man named Briggs, threw him away. To him, a hound that can't hunt isn't worth living for." Bailey flinched at the sound of that name. Briggs. Oliver could feel Bailey's heart beating faster. He couldn't speak, but his body said it all. Briggs. That name wasn't just a memory. It was the obsession that had held Bailey captive all this time. Oliver stood still. A simmering anger welled up inside him. Bailey wasn't a useless dog. He simply refused to do something he didn't believe in. And so, he was abandoned. Samson crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes defiant. "You think you can change him, kid? What good is a hound that can't hunt?" Oliver clenched his fists. He looked down at Bailey, then raised his head and replied, "He's not just a hound. He's a fighter. He chose a different path." Samson laughed, shook his head, and walked away. But Oliver's anger had not yet subsided. That evening, when they returned to the farm, Oliver sat next to Bailey. He said nothing. He just gently placed his hand on Bailey's back, feeling every breath he took, every fear he had not yet let go of. "Bailey, you are not a failure." He looked into his eyes. "You chose not to bite, not to attack, not to kill. You are not weak. You are braver than all of them." Bailey blinked. Then, for the first time since he had arrived, he placed his head on Oliver's leg. A small gesture. But to Bailey, it was the first sign of absolute trust. Oliver told his grandfather about his encounter with Samson. Mr. Walter was silent for a long time, then slowly spoke. "See, Oliver? He is not a weak dog. He is a warrior who chose a different path." Those words were engraved in Oliver's mind. The world has always had people like Briggs, like Samson, people who believe that the value of a creature lies only in what they can bring. But perhaps courage is not being the strongest. It is daring to walk on your path, even when it is difficult. Bailey was abandoned because he did not follow what people wanted. But that did not mean he was useless. He just had not found a place where he truly belonged. The boy stood up, his eyes determined. Bailey was not a discarded dog. He would prove it. He will find a new meaning for Bailey's life, a purpose that no one has forced upon him, but that he was truly born to do. Oliver has no idea what awaits them, but he knows one thing. He will not let Bailey be afraid for another day. What will Bailey do when he is confronted with his past? Can a dog who was once abandoned become more than a hunting dog? Keep reading. If you have read this far, I know you have a big heart, someone who never turns away from a weak creature. If you believe in the power of love and patience, please click share to help this story spread. Because what happens next will change Bailey's life forever. Bailey is not a lost dog. He never was. But the world has taught him that if he doesn't follow orders, if he doesn't become a useful tool, he has no value. Now, Oliver will help Bailey find himself again. Not with commands, not with force, but with love, patience, and faith. Oliver knows that Bailey is broken. Not his body, but his soul. He didn't train him to hunt. He didn't ask him to be a fighter. He just helped him remember that he was still a dog. In the early days, Bailey didn't know how to play. When Oliver threw a ball, he just stood there, staring with a blank gaze. The other dogs on the farm ran and jumped, wagging their tails happily. But Bailey didn't. He didn't know what joy was. He didn't give up. Every day, Oliver threw the toy, but he didn't force Bailey to pick it up. He praised him, even if he took just one step toward it. Whenever Bailey was scared, he didn't scold him. He just gently patted him. And then, one afternoon, when Oliver threw the ball away, Bailey lifted his foot. He held his breath. And then, in a slow, hesitant movement, Bailey walked toward the ball. He bent his head, gently touching the toy with his nose. Not picking it up, not carrying it back. But it was the first sign of change. Oliver knelt and hugged Bailey tightly. "Good job, Bailey. You're doing great." He might not understand it yet, but he believed that someday Bailey would feel the meaning of those words. Every day, Bailey changed a little. He began to run slowly beside Oliver, without fear of being attacked. He learned to smell the grass, to feel the cool breeze on his skin, without the haunting memories of his captivity. He no longer flinched when someone touched him. The walls that Bailey had built for himself were slowly crumbling. But one big question remained unanswered. What was Bailey made for? Could he find his purpose? Winter came, and snow covered the roofs and the vast fields of the town. Bailey was no longer the shivering dog he'd once been. But one final test awaited him, one that would change his life forever. That day, Oliver and Bailey were walking around the frozen lake in town. Snow was falling gently, the calm surface of the lake reflecting the pale winter sun. The laughter of children echoed across the ice. A group of children were playing, slipping on the ice. And then, crack! A terrifying sound rang out. A crack appeared in the ice. A child slipped, lost his balance, and fell into the icy water. A scream. The wind whistled past his ears. Everyone froze in fear. The winter lake water was deadly cold. No one dared to dive in. Even a minute in the water could cause the body to lose control. But before anyone could react, Bailey charged straight toward the lake, without hesitation, without fear. He was not a hunting dog. He was not a weakling. He did not need anyone to tell him what to do. He just knew that someone was in danger, and he would not stand still. Bailey swam like he had never swum before. The cold water cut into his flesh, but he did not stop. He pulled the child up, holding the shivering child with his own body. Bailey is not a hunting dog. Bailey is not a failure. Bailey is a hero. When he brought the child to shore, when the adults rushed over, when Oliver knelt and hugged him, he knew he had found meaning in his life. Bailey's story spread throughout the town. People began to look at him differently. No more pity, no more ridicule. Bailey became an icon, a symbol of courage, of love, of a life that seemed forgotten but found itself. A rescue dog training organization contacted Oliver. They wanted to help Bailey become an official rescue dog, a dog that doesn't hunt, doesn't fight, but saves. That day, Oliver stood looking at Bailey with a proud smile. You've always been strong, Bailey. You're not a lost dog. You're just waiting for a place to belong. Bailey gently touched his hand with her nose, her eyes shining with a newfound faith. And in that moment, he knew. Bailey didn't need anyone to define his worth. He had forged his path. If you're still reading this, we know you're not an ordinary person. You believe in compassion, in love, in second chances. The world needs more people like you. People who don't turn their backs on the weak. People who always look for light in the dark. If you believe in the power of love, please share your thoughts. Because maybe, somewhere out there are still dogs like Bailey, still waiting for someone to give them a chance. And maybe you are that person. Dear friends, we want to take this special moment to express our deepest gratitude to you, the one who listened, understood, and accompanied Bailey throughout this story. Among millions of videos in the world, you chose to stop here. You are not just a viewer, you are a warm-hearted person, a person who believes in compassion, a person who always wants this world to be better. You, with your patience to watch until the end, have proven that love always exists, and it has the power to change fate. You may not realize it, but your presence in this story has created a miracle. Because when you listen, the story is no longer just Bailey's or Oliver's. It becomes a part of your soul. And who knows, maybe one day you will be the one to bring hope to someone, a life, just like Oliver did for Bailey. So from the bottom of our hearts, we want to say, thank you. Thank you for believing in good things. Thank you for taking the time to feel this story. Thank you for being you. If this story has touched your heart, let's spread this meaningful message together. Click like to support the Forgotten Lives. Please share to spread hope. Because maybe somewhere out there are still other Baileys waiting for a hand to reach out to them. And don't forget, how do you rate this story from 0 to 10? We're curious to know what you think. One more thing. If you think this story is touching, imagine what happens when a homeless boy accidentally saves a mysterious stray cat, only to discover that it's not normal at all. Or, what happens when a lonely man finds an old, forgotten letter revealing an unexpected secret? Are you ready for more heart-wrenching stories? Follow along and prepare for more miracles than you could ever imagine.